I'd like to spend a few moments talking about a trip I took last week overseas. After honoring our fallen soldiers here at home in Central Ohio and Southwest Ohio, I traveled to Ukraine, where I had a meeting scheduled with Ukraine's new president, Zelensky. On my way there, I stopped in London for trade meetings and briefings by our ambassador and our excellent U.S. Embassy personnel there. I was very eager to meet President Zelensky. First of all, along with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, I have been a longtime supporter of Ukraine's quest for self-determination, democracy, and freedom from Russian aggression. As co-chair and co-founder of the Senate Ukraine Caucus, along with my colleague Dick Durbin from Illinois, I've been proud to take the lead since the Dignity Revolution in 2014 in giving Ukrainians the lethal aid and non-lethal aid they need to defend themselves from aggression in Crimea and the Donbas region. Second, I share the enthusiasm for Ukraine that is held by so many of my constituents, friends of mine, particularly in Cleveland, in that area, who are proud members of the Ukrainian diaspora. Third, I was very impressed with President Zelensky's election victory, in part because he received a remarkable 73% of the vote. I also thought that his focus on reform and change was important for the country. I wanted to meet with him and learn more about how and why his appeals for unity largely succeeded. Fourth, I wanted to hear more about his plans to fight the aggression from Russia on his eastern border, fight corruption at home, and put in place the reforms that will make his country stronger. Finally, I wanted to tell him we're with him. The United States stands by Ukraine, and our ties between our two countries can even deepen further. We want to help Ukraine succeed in this historic moment. I can report to my colleagues that I came away from the meeting with President Zelensky impressed. I was encouraged. We talked for about an hour and covered a broad range of topics. He's smart, engaging, and determined. We had a good discussion about Russian aggression in Crimea and in the Donbas region. President Zelensky has been out to the contact line, which is where the fighting is occurring. I was there last year. There's a real war going on. 13,000 people have been killed on the eastern border of Ukraine in that contact line. He spoke frankly about the bravery of his troops, but also about their needs in terms of the weapon systems and basic conditions. We talked about the Russian propaganda along the eastern border and the efforts to jam Ukrainian TV signals to sow the seeds for dissension for the people of the Donbas region. We talked about some ideas that would help counter that propaganda, the jamming and the disinformation, and I've already been in touch with the State Department about those ideas. We also talked about the 24 Ukrainian sailors captured by the Russians last November 25th in the Kerch Strait in the Azov Sea. At that time, President Trump rightly refused to meet with President Putin at the G20 summit in Argentina until those sailors were freed. President Zelensky and I talked about how to keep the pressure on Moscow to do the right thing. I gave President Zelensky my commitment to everything in our power here in the United States Senate to keep these 24 sailors front and center until the crisis is resolved. Recently, the United Nations issued a statement about these sailors, by the way, saying that they should be sent back to Ukraine, that their taking was wrong. I told President Zelensky that he is now the face of reform in Ukraine, and indeed for those of us watching around the world. He acknowledged that with a smile. He said that his commitment to reform is real, but he also had no illusions about how hard reform will be, and I'm very hopeful he will have the continued courage to see it through, whether we're talking about fighting corruption, more transparency in government, or civilian control of the military. He understands it's the only path forward, and frankly, a linchpin of the U.S. partnership with Ukraine. As a matter of law, it's also a condition on our future defense assistance. Finally, we talked about the importance of the Ukrainian diaspora in the United States, about 2 million people strong, thousands of whom live in Ohio, my constituents, about how they are putting great hopes in his leadership and are willing to do all they can to help. As I said, it was a very productive meeting, and I'm grateful for his time. Of all the messages of that discussion, one that was most important to me was when I asked him how he could win by 73% of the vote. He said it wasn't about me. It was about change and reform and betterment for the people of Ukraine. It was a modest and appropriate response. The messages of our discussion were reinforced in my meetings afterwards with Lieutenant General Ruslan Komchak. He's the new chief of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, a man with great experience and knowledge He was confident and well-informed, and we had an open and detailed talk about how the United States can be helpful. I've already begun to talk to my colleagues on the Armed Services Committee and in the Trump administration about those specifics and some of the requests that he had. So, my colleagues, I return from this brief trip to Ukraine hopeful that Ukraine is ready to write the next chapter of its long history, and it will be a chapter of freedom, with a government and society that benefits all of its citizens. And the United States of America must continue to be a good friend and ally in that quest. I'm certainly determined to do my part to make it so. I yield back my time.